Inaprubahan po ng inyong IATF ang mga sumusunod na measures na mag-take effect simula 1 po ng Disyembre ng taong ito. Kabilang dito ang pag-require ng mga establishmento at employer sa public at private sector sa mga lugar na may sapat na supply ng COVID-19 vaccine na magpapabakuna ng kanilang eligible employees na nasa on-site work. Sa mga eligible employees na hindi bakunado, maaaring hindi sila matanggal sa trabaho dahil lamang sa rason na hindi sila bakunado. Pero kinakailangan nilang mag-undergo ng regular RT-PCR testing or antigen test at their own expense.
That was Palace spokesman Harry Roque announcing government's new vaccine mandate. On-site workers in areas with sufficient vaccine stock are now required to receive jabs. Refusal will mean undergoing weekly tests at the employee's expense.
Malacanang clarifies, though, being unvaccinated should not be a ground for termination. The new policy comes at a time when government is trying to ramp up vaccine coverage. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Hall.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Government wants to meet its vax timeline and cut its stockpile by imposing mandatory vaccination among on-site workers.
As for those who would refuse, the palace said they must undergo regular swab testing out of their own pockets. Maricel Harili with The Big Story.
The government has imposed mandatory vaccination on all on-site private and public workers starting December, at least in areas with sufficient vaccine stockpile. Palace spokesman Harry Roque said employees who would be given COVID jabs during work hours shall not be considered absent. Those who refuse vaccination would have to undergo swab test at their own expense.
Maaari namang tanggihan ng public and private establishments ang pagpasok o pagbibigay serbisyo sa mga nananatiling hindi bakunado o sa mga partially vaccinated kahit na sila ay eligible naman for vaccination. Hindi kasama rito ang mga frontline at emergency services.
Roque clarified unvaxxed employees won't be fired from work. He also enjoined all local governments to incentivize the fully vaccinated. Roque suggested that they be considered VIPs when availing government services. But the public is divided with a new mandate.
Pabor ako kasi kailangan yun eh. Pero hindi ako pabor na sagot na empleyado yung swab test.
Hindi naman sa pilitan yung pagpapabakuna eh.
The Interagency Task Force, meanwhile, has allowed group activities in fitness studios and gyms in Alert Level 2 areas. The Alert Level system will also be imposed nationwide. Regions 1, 8, and 12 will adopt the system on November 12. Regions 2, 5, and 9 on November 17. And CAR, Region 4B, Caraga, and BARM on November 22. The IATF also amended the list of countries in the green, yellow, and red list. Faroe Island and the Netherlands are now part of the red list, meaning their people are not allowed to enter the Philippines, except that there are overseas Filipinos included in the repatriation efforts. But a more important question remains: mandatory face shields or not? Secretary Roque said the Interagency Task Force has already made a decision on the recommendation to lift the mandatory wearing of face shield, but they are still waiting for the approval of President Duterte. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
Implement the mandatory vaccination for on-site workers. That big question and more with Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello. Good evening, Secretary Bello.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Napa. Sir, before yung may proposal, no work, no pay, kung hindi bakunado, that brought up a lot of controversy. How are you seeing the acceptance by the labor sector of this new policy?
Yes, Robbie and Gretchen, this no vaccine, no pay is not a legal policy. You cannot deprive a worker of his pay because of his not being vaccinated. That is very clear. Because, as I have been saying, we are in a democratic country and everybody has the right of free choice. Kung gusto niya magpapakuna, well and good. Kung ayaw niya magpapakuna, hindi mo siya pwedeng pilitin. And that is the reason why if we want people to be vaccinated, then we must have a law that will mandate everybody to undergo vaccination. That's the only way to make vaccination mandatory.
Okay. In the meantime, mukhang ito po yung compromise proposal sa ngayon na ayun nga po, kung ayaw magpabakuna, edi wag, pero sagot mo ang sarili mong test. You have now a lot of workers saying, aba, mahal yun. Ay, what do you say to these concerns, sir?
Well, that's what we call disincentivizing yung mga ayaw magpabakuna. Pwede mong i-incentivize, pwede mo ding disincentivize. And that's one way of disincentivizing those workers who refuse to be vaccinated. Kung ayaw mo magpabakuna, okay, well and good. Pero para makapasok ka, kailangan PCR test ka at your own expense.
Okay.
That's a legal policy po.
But listening to the details as outlined by Secretary Roque kanina, you do qualify, government does qualify, this will only apply to areas where there is adequate supply of vaccines and access to the vaccines. So we would presume po, ang kabuuang NCR covered by this, and then outside of NCR, how do people make that determination as to whether or not categorically may access sa vaccines dito sa amin?
Yun na nga, that's where the problem is. How do we determine the the sufficiency of the supply of the vaccine to make it mandatory? Yun ang unang-una ko sinasabi ko noon, na bakit nyo ginagawang mandatory na wala naman tayong supply? Pag meron na tayo talagang supply, and regular and sufficient supply, then we can already consider making it mandatory through legislation. Pero kung gano'n ang gusto, just to disincentivize, it will do a lot of explanation. Sabihin nila sa'yo, ayaw magpabakuna. Sabihin, bakit ako magpabakuna? Wala namang bakuna. So, this is now a matter of a discussion resulting from a policy. So, ang sa tingin ko lang, the best pa rin is until we have sufficient supply of vaccine, let vaccination be optional.
But does that mean, sir, just to be clear, you're anticipating na ang gusot at gulo dito is going to be on that debate as to whether or not there is, in fact, objectively sufficient supply in a particular area?
That's correct, Robbie. That's correct. Kasi how can you go against a person who says, I want to be vaccinated, but I don't see any vaccine around? So how do you penalize a guy like that? He says, I want to be vaccinated, and I want to be vaccinated just to comply with your requirement. But there is no vaccine. So what happens? Can you penalize the guy?
Okay. Maraming salamat po. That was Labor Secretary Silvestre. The new vaccine mandate comes at a time when government is looking to administer 1.5 million jabs every day. The goal is to vaccinate 50 million Filipinos by year's end. But tonight's big number shows that that's still a tall order. 30.8 million. That's the fully vaccinated population so far in the Philippines, a little over 28% of the population. But if it's any indication that we might be heading in the right direction, the country also reached its highest single-day jab record. 1.24 billion shots were administered on November 11.
These are the other big stories tonight. Substitution isn't the only thing making a comeback in the political scene. A Lakas-CMD executive floats the possibility of a term-sharing agreement between Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte and presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos. All options are still on the table for PDP-Laban, including a possible fielding of its original tandem, with President Duterte being Senator Bongo's running mate. And can't wait to get your toes on some powdery white sand. Doing that just got easier. Boracay waives its testing requirement for the fully vaccinated. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. With a deadline for substitution just a few days away, all eyes are on Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte's next move.
One official from her new party has floated the idea of term sharing with fellow presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos. Marian Enriquez with the details.
After officially taking her oath as a member of the Lakas-CMD party, the question now is, will she be vying for a top post? For Lakas-CMD President Martin Romualdez, they want Mayor Sara Duterte to run for president.
We would obviously want to have the highest position, but then again, we also respect the prerogative of the candidate.
Romualdez added that he sees no issue in supporting both Mayor Sara and his cousin, presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos.
I don't foresee a conflict. I think Mayor Sara and former Senator Bongbong Marcos are good friends. They've been communicating, they've been in dialogue.
But is there already a brewing alliance between Mayor Sara and Bongbong Marcos?
We're thinking very positively about this, and if anything, will be a small part in the middle of hopefully getting two very, very excellent leaders that can help serve the country.
In a radio interview, Lakas-CMD co-chairman and Quezon Governor Danilo Suarez floated the possibility of a term-sharing agreement between the two. Suarez said Duterte and Marcos can equally split the 6-year term in Malacanang. This idea, however, did not sit well with Romualdez and even Marcos himself.
I'm not too sure what he was thinking of, but in my opinion, I think that's a matter that the candidates should think of or consider. But offhand, in my opinion, I don't think that is necessary to even consider a term share.
3-year terms is too short for especially national, and there is no stability, and that's my problem with that.
One political analyst likewise disagreed with the proposal.
I think that is a disgusting suggestion because it undermines the institution of the presidency as an important pillar of democracy.
Article 7, Section 8 of the 1987 Constitution states that a vice president can replace the president only in cases of death, permanent disability, removal from office, or resignation. According to Romualdez, Mayor Sara will most likely reveal her decision over the weekend as consultations between her and the party continue. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
While Lakas-CMD has yet to make its plans known, ruling party PDP-Laban says all options are still on the table. That would include the party's original plan to field Senator Bong Go for president, with President Duterte as his vice president. This as the Cusi-led PDP-Laban said they are still closely monitoring changes in the national political landscape. Meanwhile, Senator Manny Pacquiao admitted not having informed PDP-Laban Chairman Coco Pimentel about his recent meeting with President Duterte, but he denied speculations that he will jump ship.
Here are other election stories we're keeping our eyes on. The Commission on Elections has issued a summons to Bongbong Marcos yesterday over a petition to cancel his candidacy as president. COMELEC spokesman James Jimenez said they're awaiting proof of service as the summons is expected to be served today. Upon receipt of the Marcos Jr. camp, they will be given 5 days to file an answer. President Rodrigo Duterte appointed his bedtime fraternity brother, Manila Chief Prosecutor Ray Bulay, as COMELEC Commissioner. Bulay will be the 7th member of the commission. He still has to clear the commission on appointments before assuming office until February 2, 2027. And Marcos Jr. held a motorcade in Batangas and Quezon Province before meeting with local officials. Vice President Leni Robredo, meanwhile, went to Cebu and spoke with community organizers, religious officials, and youth leaders. As for Manila Mayor Isko Moreno and his party, they met with supporters in Laguna and discussed plans on small businesses if elected to office.
As vaccination picks up the world over, a new crisis is looming. a shortage of syringes, and that might just be a huge setback for the country's inoculation drive. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to this story.
The initial shortage of COVID-19 vaccine had slowed down the country's inoculation drive, but the Philippines may soon face another hurdle. In its latest report, the World Health Organization expects a global shortage of syringes of 1 to 2 billion next year.
Pero ito pong 0.3 ml syringes na specifically ginagamit po for mRNA vaccines, ito po ang nagkukulang.
The demand for syringes for COVID-19 shots have outpaced the regular supply line. The WHO said we need 6.8 billion syringes per year just for COVID-19 vaccination. That's already 13% more than the current manufacturing capacity worldwide of 6 billion syringes. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres said this would mostly affect the rollout of Pfizer and Moderna.
If we're trying to use another CC like yung 2 ml or 3 ml na syringe, hindi siya masyadong calibrated.
The WHO said the shortage happened. It would further slow down our vaccine rollout and could lead to possible negligence in syringe safety.
They say there are two dangers if you don't use the right vaccine, the right syringe with a proper vaccine brand. You can either give an overdose to the patient or an underdose. The next danger is that it's possible that if you don't use the right syringe, you can actually put air into the syringe and then inject it to the body of the patient, which can be critical.
The health department already ordered the regional offices to buy and use tuberculin syringes as an alternative since it can be calibrated from 0.1 ml to 1 ml. Hospital ng Maynila in Manila says they still have enough supply of the 0.3 ml syringe as it is provided by the local government, but they have experienced shortage of it in the past.
Nakukulangan kami minsan ng needle, ng syringe, kapag yun nga, kung hindi siya nagamit ng maayos, kapag hindi siya nag-open.
Vergeres said they're also exploring other options to source the 0.3 ml syringe. She said they already ordered 44 million syringes through UNICEF. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, We Are One News.
She is perhaps the most important decision maker in the world of fashion. As editor-in-chief of Vogue USA and Condé Nast chief content officer, the Anna Wintour is all about creating a new generation of leaders.
I get huge amounts of pleasure from seeing other people do well. I am so proud when I see people that I've mentored, young talent that I've mentored, whether whatever world they may be in.
In a chat with leaders of the MVP Group, the head honcho of a billion-dollar mass media company said she herself started as a young talent who took after her father.
I think I was, as I said before, very influenced by my father and his success, and seeing how he could really have an impact on news and how people thought.
And in order to build others up, she stresses the need to create trust and to never cower away from challenges.
If they don't understand a clear vision and a clear strategy and a clear decision-making process, nothing is worse than not understanding what's needed, what one's goals are, what one's aims are. I think everybody works better when they understand the way forward. Always to learn from challenges.
For News 5, MJ Marfori, We Are One News.
Time for another quick break. When we return. Already got your complete dose of COVID jabs? Then you are one step closer to a hassle-free flight to Boracay. Someone's got big shoes to fill. Teenager Vanessa Sarno hopes to take after Golden Girl Heidelin Diaz as she competes in the World Weightlifting Championships. And all it takes is a little girl escaping bedtime to disrupt a world leader from giving updates to her nation. The hilarious and heartwarming moment after the break.
But you'll see that greater certainty for business. You're meant to be in bed, darling.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Just in time for the holidays, Boracay is scrapping its RT-PCR test requirement for fully vaccinated tourists.
An airline company is backing that move, stating that there has been no increase in COVID-19 cases even as requirements were eased. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez gives us a front seat to the story.
Good news for those who have been dreaming of Boracay's white sands. Beginning November 16, RT-PCR tests will no longer be required for fully vaccinated tourists. In lieu of a negative swab result, travelers will just need to show proof of vaccination.
We only will require the vaxxed of the DICT. In the absence of the vaxxed, the vaccination card with QR codes. In the absence of that, a vaccination certificate from the issuing LGU.
Those who have not been vaccinated can still go, but will still need to present negative swab results. All travelers will also have to submit advanced hotel bookings and online declaration forms. Miraflores claims the island has already achieved herd immunity for its general population.
94% of our tourism workers is already fully vaccinated. 70% of our community is also vaccinated. And so we're now ready to open Boracay to more tourists.
Philippine Airlines has been monitoring passenger traffic, and there hasn't been a significant increase in COVID cases for LGUs that have decided to drop the swab requirement.
When some LGUs have started to allow just vaccination card instead of RT-PCR testing, you don't see a significant increase or even an increase. It's actually a continuing decrease in positivity rate while you're seeing travel increase continuing.
Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs says IATF members are working towards implementing a single, unified document for travel across all methods.
Come up with a unified domestic travel system, it has to be aligned with the LGU requirements.
In October, more than 32,000 people visited Boracay. The Malay office says the island has not recorded any COVID cases as of October 26. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
For the big story in sports, no Hydrin Diaz, no problem. Teenage sensation Vanessa Sarno will go all out as she leads Team Philippines in the World Weightlifting Championships in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Dubbed as the heir to Diaz's throne, Sarno is expected to carry the fight for the country in the World Championship tilt set from December 7 to 17. Sarno, though, will not be the only promising lifter in the 11-strong national team, as the likes of Tokyo Olympian Elrene Ando and Southeast Asian Games gold medalist Cristel Macrohon will also see action.
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern may be a strong-willed leader, giving important COVID updates to her people on Facebook Live. But her daughter effortlessly brings out her soft spot in this rather serious engagement. Let's see how the mini Jacinda did it. Jacinda.
You'll see that greater certainty for business. You're meant to be in bed, darling. It's bedtime, darling. Pop back to bed. I'll come and see you in a second. I'll come and see you in a minute, okay? Sorry, everybody. Yeah, Nanny will take you down to bed. Thanks, Nana. And again, it's based on the health advice. Oh, it is. I'm sorry, darling. It is taking so long. Okay.
A
Kids
mother's
never fail.
work is never done. Totoo
Grabe,
naman yan.
Oo, kaya naman saludo tayo sa lahat ng mga nanay na nagtiis sa pandemya. Matatapos na, feeling ko nararamdaman ko matatapos na tong pandemic na to. Konting tiis na lang.
Konti pa.
Konti pa. But before all of that, November 15, Monday na, partner. Let's rest for the weekend. Enjoy.
Maraming balita sa November 15.
Oo, kasi yung UP Diliman, magbubukas yung academic oval.
Oo
yun yung
nga,
sinasabi
oo
ko.
nga.
Ano ba sinasabi mo?
Akala ko yung deadline Akala ko deadline for substitution. Sige, maraming mag-iikot-ikot habang inaantay ang balita sa araw na yun.
But please stay safe over the weekend. Well, that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again Monday at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash
And
hands.
stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.
Pangyayari ha.
Oo, ang daming mga nangyayari.
Kakaibang eleksyon ito, kakaiba. Wow.